This is a very difficult transition question because it's not obvious to me what the actual revelation is between these two sentences, and so what the connection would be. So I have trouble kind of imagining my own transition here. So we're going to have to use a strategic approach, and that's one good thing about these transition questions is they do involve a lot of strategy, and that makes them a lot easier. So the first thing I would actually notice here is that choices B and C basically mean the same thing. They're both versions of the word but. And so what does that mean for us strategically? Well, if they both mean the same thing, it's really hard for one of them to be right and the other to be wrong, right? Like, what would be the distinction? And since there isn't a good one, that means that they can both be crossed out, right? Two choices cannot be right. And if they mean the exact same thing, then they must both be wrong. That's really helpful right off the bat because now it takes this decision of between four choices and turns it into a decision between two. And I do think that it makes it easier because now we have this word indeed, which maybe we don't know what that means, and the word therefore, which is basically a more advanced version of the word so. It's kind of like a because. So let's take a look at these sentences and see. In the beginning here it says, this common rebuttal to climate change is trotted out by skeptics at least once a year, but it fails to acknowledge a key fact about climate science. So in a way that does sound kind of negative, but let's look at the next sentence. Warmer global temperatures would actually cause some places to experience more severe winters with greater precipitation. Well, it's not really a so situation. We're talking about a key fact about climate science, but that key fact isn't causing some places to be colder. That is the key fact, that some places will be colder. So there's no cause and effect here. The second sentence is not effect of the first. It's literally almost like an example or a continuation of that first idea. And so in this way, I'm more just eliminating the wrong answers, and that forces me to pick A because it's all that's left. What does indeed mean? Maybe that's a good question for us to answer. Indeed is a word that adds emphasis, okay? It's basically just a way of saying, what I'm about to say is important. So in this case, they're really just trying to emphasize that what we'd expect to happen with global warming is actually the opposite of what could happen in certain places. So I don't know how much emphasis it's really adding, but that's what its point is. On the SAT, for practical purposes, indeed is basically the answer choice you pick when nothing else works. And so don't be afraid of it, but very rarely are you going to naturally gravitate towards it. So that's why these questions lend themselves to strategy and why we sometimes need to use it so that we can pick these weirder transitions that don't jump out as being right. So we got to be able to summarize the transition words, we got to be able to summarize the transition sentences, but ultimately there is some strategy to these questions. Your instincts may not help you. So hopefully now you know the strategy, now you can get some of these harder ones right.